I think so. Can folks hear me? Yes? How's your lunch? Good? I'm seeing thumbs up. Good. We are ready to get started with our lunchtime panel. So while I know that your conversations are rich and inspiring, our next speaker is also going to be very inspiring. So I want to turn it over to Monica Allard of the ACLU Vermont to talk a little bit about this panel and introduce our speaker.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. I am standing in for one of my coworkers who is incredible and couldn't join us here today. So apologies for not being off book. I'm going to be reading some remarks for you all today. My name is Monica Allard, or Mo Allard. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a staff attorney with the ACLU of Vermont. It is my privilege and my pleasure today to introduce you all to Mohsen Madawi. Mohsen is, oh yeah, please. Mohsen is many things. He is an activist for Palestinian rights. He is a lawful permanent resident, a scholar, and a graduate student at Columbia University, an advocate for peace building, a longtime Vermonter, a pen pal to my coworker Hillary's nieces, and an ACLU client. We are part of Mohsen's larger legal team that includes the National ACLU, the CLEAR Project, and the firm Beldock, Levine, and Hoffman. We're proud to be representing Mohsen in his fight against the Trump administration's unlawful efforts to detain and deport him for exercising his right to free speech. This past April, I was walking out of a hearing for Rumeysa Ozturk, a graduate student at Tufts University, who had been detained for co-authoring an op-ed when my coworker Hillary got a call that the administration had arrested another student in retaliation for his speech supporting Palestine. Mohsen had been at his naturalization interview in Colchester, the final step in the long process to becoming a US citizen. At the conclusion of that interview, after he swore to uphold the laws and Constitution of the United States, armed federal agents entered the room, handcuffed Mohsen, and attempted to shuttle him onto a flight to Louisiana. Mohsen missed this flight by a matter of minutes. And thanks to the quick work of his attorneys, a judge forbid the government from transferring Mohsen out of Vermont while his case was pending. And through the course of that case, it quickly became apparent that Mohsen was not arrested because he was being charged with a crime. Instead, the government's only reason for attempting to detain and deport Mohsen was to silence his peaceful advocacy for the human rights of Palestinians. The Trump administration is trying to argue that it has the power to muzzle speech it doesn't like and deport non-citizens who dare to speak up. So at every step, the courts have rightly rejected this argument and have refused to allow the government to so blatantly disregard the Constitution. After 16 days in a Vermont prison, a judge ordered Mohsen to be released, allowing him to return to his communities, his studies, and his advocacy. But this legal battle is not over, and the government was in court just weeks ago, arguing again that it has the authority to lock Mohsen back up. After Mohsen's remarks today, I'll share with you all a little bit about the status of Mohsen's legal case and what this fight means for all of us, regardless of our immigration status. This lawsuit brought global attention to Mohsen, but as you'll hear, it's probably the least interesting thing about him. Thank you all for being here to hear from an advocate whom the US government is trying to silence. And Mohsen, thank you for sharing part of your story with us today. Take it away.
Thank you, Monica. It's such an honor and a pleasure to be able to hear. Can you hear me clearly? Is the voice clear? Very good. It's an honor and pleasure always to be in community with you. Thank you for all of the work, and to be connected with my community in Vermont, Vermonters. I always describe Vermont as sweet as the maple syrup that we get from the maple trees, as connected as the hemlock trees, how they connect under the ground and protect each other, and as free as the hermit thrush, the beautiful bird of Vermont. And I feel very grateful and very honored to be with you. Even I am not there in person, I'm with you in spirit. And thanks to spirit technology, as one of my friends say, for connecting us, even though we had some issues at the beginning. So it's very um, it's very inspiring to see that this conference is bringing local organizations that care for human rights in Randolph, in Vermont. And this is, Vermont has been an exemplar of protecting civil rights in America, protecting the Constitution, and also advocating for human rights. As Monica has shared, I've been targeted for for practicing my peaceful speech, my First Amendment rights, and for advocating for the rights of my people, the Palestinian people. For some of you who may not be aware of my story, I was born and raised in a refugee camp in the West Bank, where my family still resides until now. As a third generation, I was born on about 60 acres with more than 10,000 people there. And the reason is that Israel has exiled my family, forced them out, and for 3 generations, for 77 years, we've been waiting for the right of return, which is enshrined actually in international law. During my time in the camp growing up, I have seen serious, serious violations of human rights. As a child, at the age, shortly after the age of 11, I saw my best friend, who was 14 years old, getting shot in front of my eyes on the hand of an Israeli soldier. As a child, I saw my uncle, Thayer, who was murdered on the hands of the Israeli army as well. One shot in the head and two shots in the one shot in the shoulder and two shots in the head, and I saw him saturated in blood. As a child, I saw 7 of my neighbors shattered into pieces and collected their body parts with my tiny hands and put them in plastic bags to honor them. In violation, this is all violation of human rights. As a child, I witnessed a severe level of trauma, the bombing that shakes every atom of your body in the middle of the night, the whistle of the shootings that every time you hear it whistling around your head, you think, this is my time. And as a child, I grew up in a place I've never felt safe. And I don't know if I can call it even a home, because a home, according to my understanding and what Khalil Gibran says, a home is where you feel safe and loved, and those who surround you there are your people. So I never felt safe until I came to America. And I never actually experienced what freedom is until I came to America. The freedom of traveling without checkpoints, the freedom to be able to sleep safely in a place, the freedom to be able to express your opinion, which used to be a norm, one of the major pillars for civil rights, the freedom of assembly. All of that is something that was theoretical for me that I've never had the chance to experience. And America has provided me, and Vermont has provided me with that freedom. the freedom to sleep in a safe place and to not feel that somebody is going to break into my house, the army, the freedom to sit with my feelings and to be able to hike in the mountains in Vermont, in the forest, and process my feelings and heal the trauma and the pain from the childhood. The freedom to speak up my mind and to share my story. And those freedoms were so tight and so deep to my heart that made me deeply love this country and love the community that I am in. So I define myself usually as a Palestinian Vermonter, and people turn their head. They they don't know how to explain it or how to understand it when I share that I am a Palestinian Vermonter. So, based on my experience here, I've been in America for over 11 years. I've experienced this sense of freedom that was so theoretical for me before until I came here. And I experienced also the depth of connection to the community and to the people. After 11 years of working in America, I came here legally, going through many background checks on a green card. I worked here, paid taxes, went to the best institutions in this country, educational institutions, and I have respected the law, never committed a crime. The time came to decide to apply for a citizenship. And as you have heard, during my citizenship, it was actually a citizenship interview. It was actually a trap where instead of walking out of the office as an American citizen, I was walked out handcuffed, put in an unmarked vehicle, driven to a prison cell, and kept in a prison cell for 16 days. And what is the reason for that? The whole reason is that I raised my voice, I organized peacefully, I taught people how to stay disciplined and nonviolent, and I rooted all of my work in the framework that you are all gathering here for, the framework of international law and human rights. Because I believe in the principles and values of human rights and international law. And I learned that actually human rights is a product of Western civilization. For some of you who may not be aware, Eleanor Roosevelt, she got involved in 1946, and she helped drafting the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. That is the Bible of the universal rights. So I saw the depth and the correlation, in fact, between the constitution of this country and the civil rights, the right to free speech, the right of assembly, the right of having religion or no religion, the right to have free press, the right to a fair trial, the right to against torture. All of these rights are aligned with the human rights. And they said, basically what I'm advocating for is equality and freedom for my people, the Palestinian people, within the frame of international law, resolving the issue of about 5 million Palestinians, more than 2 million before the Gaza destruction and genocide, were living and are still living in refugee camps. Children who experience on daily basis what I've experienced as a child don't deserve in this situation. And the right of the refugees to return to their homes, and the right to have equal citizenship and equal rights, and to not live under an apartheid regime, a systematic discrimination that Palestinians go through. All of that could be resolved within the framework of human rights and international law. But what we have witnessed and seen recently is an attack that is very dangerous, because it aims and its goal to deteriorate and to destroy, in fact, the international order and human rights. And it's so dangerous. Many people think it is just about Palestine, because we know what is the Palestine exception, that rights and principles and values can be applied to so many people. Until it comes to Palestine, there is double standard. But the way how I see it, that it is tied to the future of our humanity. Because if this system that we have invested in, and it has failed many people, like the constitution in this country, it promises to deliver rights, and yet the fight for rights for African American people, for the Native American people, for minorities still continues. But you refer to the anchor and to the compass that drives us towards a better future. And I believe that human rights provide that. So the attack on human rights is so dangerous because if we don't have it, what else are we going to have? If they succeed in basically normalizing and justifying what happened to the Palestinian people, the genocide that killed more than 70,000 Palestinians, destroyed every element of life, something that we have not seen in the 21st century, life streamed, and the continuous violations and annexations in the West Bank and the attacks on villages, on camps, on cities, unleashing settler violence. If we don't hold that, the Israeli government and those extremists accountable according to international law and human rights, what else will we have? And this applies on Sudan. This applies on Ukraine. This applies on Taiwan. This applies on many different parts of the world. So the future of human rights will dictate which direction our humanity is going. And we see the supremacy rising worldwide. And we see it in the country that used to be considered a beacon of democracy. Democracy and human rights are aligned because, as I mentioned, the pillars of democracy are enshrined and built with the principles of human rights. And that is also in line with the Constitution. So now what we see, what we saw with myself and with other students as well, and academics, the attack on free speech at university campuses, very chilling. Now you see the situation when you go to university campuses, an environment of fear, especially among international students who usually come to contribute and to share their thoughts and to be valued for what they have. The government has succeeded in chilling their speech, and that's an attack on human rights. To suppress people's opinions and beliefs to be shared. And it's also an attack to American citizens' rights, because every American citizen has the right to access information. And what I was talking about and what I brought to Columbia University and to America is not only about me as a first-hand, having a first-hand experience, a person who sharing his experience. It's more also about the American people who have the right to access this information. It's not much different when the government comes to silence me, to put me in prison, and to continue fighting, to punish me for my peaceful activism. What they are trying to do, they're trying to prevent Americans from accessing the information and the stories that I have. It's not much different than banning a book or banning books from being sold in libraries. So what's happening here in America is very serious. And what will happen, America will dictate, in fact, what the future could look like for humanity. And if this Project 2025, if they succeed in orchestrating it and demolishing and destroying human rights here in this country, silencing people, punishing people for their speech, they will be able to do it on a much larger level. That's why I believe that America will play an important role, and American people will play an important role on an international level. Now, one thing I have to bring to your attention, when there is actually a violation of the constitution of this country, first of all, I have to say that the constitution of this country and human rights are in alignment with each other. There is no contradictions between them. But what you need to keep in mind that when there is an attack on the constitution, human rights will be used as a stabilizer to any issues that we see because they are straightforward, they are very clear, and you will be able to clearly pinpoint which violations are happening. There is no interpretation of them. Therefore, what I see that the human rights, the framework of human rights, has been created in a way that actually will stabilize and further rights in this country. And an attack on one could lead to an attack on the other. Now, I have friends who are actually attending similar conference in Chicago, where students are coming together and university professors to talk about human rights. And what I heard yesterday, that there is such a level of despair and a level of feeling hopelessness and inability to bring change and to make a difference. And this was disheartening for me to hear because this is actually the tool that dictatorship and authoritarian regimes would want people to not have hope, to limit the imagination, and to tell you that basically you can't make a difference. But I believe we can make a difference, and we can make a difference on every level. And now it's time to bring it home. How do we bring it home? It's international law and human rights. It's not something that is dictated from up down, which was and has been the way. But now, when we see the government itself violating it and going against it, it's time to bring it home. And to bring it home is to ensure that the principles of human rights and the guidelines of human rights are encoded and codified internally and applied on institutional level, on a local level, on a city level, and on a state level. And that's not that complicated because we have the agency and you have the agency to bring that into action. Now, what does that mean? If you make human rights and international law part of your compass, along with the constitution of this country, we have a powerful tool, the tool of investment, divestment. You invest in organizations and entities that are furthering and supporting human rights, and you divest from companies and entities that are violating human rights. And this is a powerful tool. It needs a little bit of education and a little bit of organizing. But this is the future, not only the future of this country, as I mentioned, it's the future of humanity as well. With this being said, students have not given up. We are organizing and we are building. And we are building because we want to see a peaceful future, a future of equality, a future of cooperation, a future of freedom, and the future of equal rights for all people, and especially children, because children are innocent of any guilt and they deserve to live in a peaceful conditions, peaceful environment, without fear, without trauma, without discrimination. And I believe that we can bring this together. I want to invite you to stay in touch with me. I have a website that is, you can go to freemuhsin.org, or you can follow me on Instagram, and there is a link there. We are collecting names of volunteers. You are very passionate about this project, and we would want to build a movement. And my prediction, we will be able to build the largest movement in the human history, because this is the time where fear and love are kind of clashing with each other. And the project is to incite fear, to intimidate people, to prevent us from imagining a better future, and to crush hope. But the more of us that come together, the more of us who raise their voices, bring our hearts together, the less fear there is, and the more love we are spreading. I am truly honored to be with you today. I wish that I was in person to look into your eyes, to shake your hands, to have conversations afterwards. But I am sure that soon this time will come. And my last words is don't give up on hope, because the only place that hope can be diminished or where hope could die is within us, and we have to give a permission to that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mohsen. As our ACLU ED is fond of saying, we're only in a constitutional crisis if we, sit down and accept it. The fact that we continue to fight back means we're not in a constitutional crisis yet. And on that note, I want to share with you all a little bit more about Mohsen's legal case, where we're at now, where we go from here, and what that outcome will really mean for all of us. So taking us back to Mohsen's arrest, within a few hours of his arrest, his legal team filed a special request called a habeas petition here in Vermont Federal District Court. Habeas petitions are a form of emergency relief when someone in government custody needs to be freed. And essentially, Mohsen's team argued that he should be released from ICE custody because his detention violated his constitutional rights. In response to this, Vermont really rallied around Mohsen. There was an outpouring of love with protests outside the courthouse and over 120 letters from community members, neighbors, colleagues, Jewish and Palestinian friends of Mohsen that they all submitted on his behalf. He's really built a strong community here. And after a hearing, the judge here in Vermont determined that the government had not shown that Mohsen should be locked up and ordered him to be released on bail while his case continues, because his detention was a violation of his First Amendment rights. But instead of recognizing their overreach, the government doubled down and asked the Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit, an appellate court that's a level below the Supreme Court, to pause the judge's order and allow the government to re-detain him. When that failed, the government appealed the Vermont judge's order again, regurgitating the same stale, now thrice repeated arguments back up to the Second Circuit. I was down and saw Mohsen down in New York in September for this hearing at the Second Circuit. And I heard the government attorneys argue there standing in this courthouse in front of the appeals court that federal courts have no business reviewing the government's decision to detain a non-citizen. Essentially, they claim that the government should have unfettered discretion to detain non-citizens, even though non-citizens are entitled to the same First Amendment protections as citizens under our Constitution. And the sole reason for that detention, again, was Mohsen's constitutionally protected speech. The government is claiming, essentially, that whenever it decides to detain someone, the only court that can order their release is an immigration court. This is deeply problematic for many reasons. We don't have the time today to fully dive into the intersection of federal courts and immigration courts. Know that they're really different. And we'll have a panel later this afternoon that talks more about immigration law. But there are a few things about immigration court that it's important for you to know. Number one is that immigration judges are not real judges. Unlike federal judges who are nominated by the president and approved by the Senate and have to go through this whole independent separate process, immigration judges are officers of the executive branch, which means they work for the president. Which means that when folks go into immigration court, The opposing party is the executive branch, right? The president's office. And the judge is also an employee of the president, right? And so there's no independent third party decider in that situation. Another difference is that immigration courts are not actually authorized to rule on constitutional claims. And just going back quickly to immigration judges, another important thing that we've seen is that in this administration, we're really seeing an effort to stack immigration courts with so many officials that don't have any experience in immigration law. And we're seeing immigration judges that do apply standards in a more impartial way be kicked out, be fired, essentially. And again, so once you're in immigration court, they can't hear your constitutional claims, which means that if you're detained like Mohsen was on your on First Amendment grounds, you can't even raise that as a defense in immigration court. And if an immigration judge orders you deported, you can appeal that to the Board of Immigration Appeals, but that board is another executive branch agency. And at that level, those officials still are not required to address constitutional issues. Finally, if you exhaust those two levels, there is a third level of appeal where your case could eventually make it out of the executive branch and pass to the judicial branch into a federal court of appeals, the Second Circuit, where Mohsen's case is now. And those federal courts are independent decision makers that are actually bound by the Constitution. But the problem is that those judges on a court of appeals are not allowed to look at facts that weren't considered on the record below. And because the record below can't consider your constitutional claims, it means essentially that the Second Circuit or those appeal level courts can't either. So if you're detained in violation of your constitutional rights, like Mohsen arrested for exercising his First Amendment rights to free speech, you would never have the chance to make those constitutional arguments, and the Court of Appeals can't hear them later. So you could be locked up for months or years without the chance for a real judge to address these injustices. And this is why the power of habeas corpus is so important. Effectively, the government is trying to insulate its actions from any kind of independent and meaningful review. But non-citizens have constitutional rights, and trying to silence one of us harms all of us. It creates a precedent for all of our rights to be further eroded. Habeas corpus is important in the immigration context, but it applies in other contexts too. And it's not a right that we want to be eroded. This chills the speech of others who self-censor for fear of retaliation, and it deprives us of the opportunity to learn from the unique perspectives of people like Mohsen when we're participating in our democracy. At its core, it is impossible to have a functioning democracy without the freedom of speech, and we can't have a functioning democracy if our government is stifling free speech. So we're now waiting for the Second Circuit to decide whether federal courts can hear habeas cases like Mohsen's, and if the government should have the power to redetain Mohsen. The stakes are high for Mohsen and for all of us, but I want to be clear that in the life cycle of a case, this is an important inflection point, but there's still a long road ahead. We won't know how impactful this decision will be until it's issued. And regardless of the outcome, either side has the opportunity to appeal, whether to the full Second Circuit or up to the Supreme Court. So whether we lose or win at this stage, there will be a path forward to continue this case, and we can continue to fight for our fundamental rights. So now I got the notice that we have 15 minutes left, which is perfect. We'd like to open the floor to questions from Mohsen, and I'm happy to answer questions that I can about his legal case with the caveat that because the lawsuit is ongoing, there are certain aspects that we're just not able to speak to at this time. Are there any questions?
Hi, I was just wondering, why isn't this considered kidnapping and human trafficking?
Thank you for that question. And Mohsen, I'm happy to take that one. What I can say is that it is kidnapping, right? It is completely kidnapping to take someone who you don't have a legal right to seize and detain. And part of the beauty of a habeas relief is that it can do exactly that. It can say to the government, you know, you've taken my body. That's part of what habeas corpus is referring to, right? That my physical body is being seized, and you don't have a right to, and you have to free me. And that's how Mohsen was able to be released due to the work of the ACLU and our partners. And that's part of how we've been able to obtain the release of our other client, Rumeysa Ozturk, who faced similar retaliation for her First Amendment expression. And habeas corpus relief is being used by other immigration practitioners all throughout our state who are trying to find ways to combat these kidnappings that we're seeing continue of non-citizens throughout our state. You know, we just saw some happen in Jeffersonville just the other day. And that's why this relief is so important, and that's why it's so critical that we continue to have access to it.
Yeah, I
While we're
believe.
waiting, I have a question, and then I can pass it on. Mohsen, you talked a little bit about the need to divest from entities that are putting civil rights in reverse and invest in entities that are putting them forward. Do you have any specific ideas about what Vermont as a state or Vermonters as citizens could do in that regard?
Thank you for the question, Kate. And also thank you for the question before that I heard about kidnapping. So I will start with answering the question related to the divestment and investment. On the Palestinian issue, because what's happening is serious violation, and those violations are not just since October 7th. They've been going on for 77 years. So the way how I would look at it is you go to the United Nations and you look at the corporations and the companies that they have listed, and there will have to be a strict, basically guidelines and education in order to be able to carry on those recommendations for any entities such as corporations and companies that are violating human rights and supporting the genocide and the apartheid, that on a legislative level in Vermont, it could be passed. On a store level in Vermont, there are certain companies that are benefiting from the occupation that you can see as well in the retail business. Caterpillar, for example, in terms of excavations and other work, and those could be laws that would be passed on a local level that either increases the cost for those companies or allow for divestment and actually create guidelines for divestment from those companies. And the last one that is actually very important and deeply related, that most of the violations, especially armed conflict around the world in Palestine and other places, it's fueled by different entities. One of them is the weapons industry. And you would want to be very careful about where the divestment on city level, on institutional level, and on a state level, where the investment is going. Because if there is investment, and there is usually good rewards from, especially during conflict, because as you would imagine, the manufacturing of technology that is used to advance war and to kill people, including weapons, it is going to bring more rewards, so and more higher interest return on investment. So this is also something to pay attention to. And the other part is it's also financed. So countries use banks and basically financial institutions in order to finance the conflict. and you would want to not invest or to deal or to work with financial institutions that do this work. I believe that recently we found out that JP Morgan has been part of those institutions that are financing wars and giving money. So groups or states that are conducting serious violations of human rights can use that money to purchase American weapons and to kill human beings or to subjugate them to very deep levels of injustice and oppression.
Thank you, Mohsen.
My pleasure.
Mohsen, it's nice to meet you, even virtually. I've followed your, I'm a human rights and civil rights lawyer in Vermont, been doing this work for close to 50 years. I'm struck by your hopefulness. I'm struck by your vision. They obviously are trying to crush the spirit of many of us, and particularly you. And I'm very much struck by your perseverance through all of that. And I have to say that I've succumbed in recent. Trump, too, is really a crushing blow. And I find myself wallowing in despair as opposed to engage in productive activism. What can you say to me and others who are feeling that weight? I'm inspired by your story. I didn't know the background. I followed the litigation in the federal court here. I followed your story in the Times, but meeting you and hearing where you come from and seeing the level of hopefulness and commitment and love is remarkable. Any words of wisdom you could share with us in terms of keeping our spirits up? Thank you for your work.
Thank you. I'm very touched. And what I would say to you, I would thank you first for carrying the torch for this long, for 50 years, because the work that you have been doing and that you have done is what gave me hope. And it's my honor that I bring this hope back to you and share with you that there is a way. My fundamental understanding of how do you keep hope is it's in the body. So my theory of change is that in order to bring change to the world, it starts from change from within. And usually when we are experiencing despair or hopelessness, and you pay attention to your body, you will find out that your body is actually having tension. So hopelessness comes from, and now I'm talking about emotional level, not necessarily intellectual level. All of our emotions come from a spectrum of feelings, the positive and the negative. The positive comes from a root emotion, which is love, and the negative comes from a root emotion, which is fear. Now, when we are in positive emotions, usually you would have hope. When you are in negative emotions, you will have despair. But the trick with this is it's all in the body. So if you are, I do a lot of meditation. If you scan your body while you're meditating, you will notice tension, and tension, generally speaking, related to negative emotions, to fear. The moment you release that, you are in a state of love and you are in a state of clarity. So the moment you have that, you will be able to see and envision. So again, the theory that I stay hopeful and I see the potential and the possibility is it starts from within. I balance myself, I root myself, I calm my emotion, and emotion comes and goes. And the moment I am in a state of clarity, I am able to see it. But also I see how is this manifesting on a larger level. I see the interconnectedness among humans in a way we have never seen in our lives before. And some would argue that the interconnectedness that people who are advocating for fear which fear also is a root that leads to supremacy and leads to ignorance and leads to justification of inequality and injustice. And the people who are rooted in love, love brings unity. Fear brings division and self-centeredness and retraction, and love brings unity and expansion. So one can argue that because we are all interconnected, people who are believing in the philosophy and who are centered in fear are coming together, and people who are believing in love and who are centered in love are coming together, and that's what I shared the clash. But I see the possibility and the potential for it, and I believe that the human nature at its core is a good human nature. So we see the hope. For example, when we built the pro-Palestine movement here at Columbia, it happened in a very in a harmonious way on other universities. And what we have now, we have an infrastructure of many communities and many people who are connected. And if the vehicle is justice, justice would be delivered for Palestine and for human rights and for Ukraine and for Sudan and for America. And the idea is we would want just to continue connecting with people and spreading that energy of love, because it is really expansive and it's infectious as well. The moment you feel it, you feel attracted to it. And I believe more and more people from the campaign of fear and campaign of discrimination will be changing. And I've seen many people changing their minds and hearts, people who I never imagined that would be able to shift.
Right. Thank you so much, Mohsen.
My pleasure.
And thank you for that question. I think it's a good note to end on, right? That we say sometimes that anger is what strikes the match and hope is the fuel that keeps us burning, right? And so it gives me hope to see all of you here today. I think that